Hey, so today we are going to just do a really quick review of what we studied a couple of class periods ago, and I'm going to move on to something else related to this. What was the name of the guy that kind of developed that structure we looked at? Remember his name? Freytag. Now, I just want to clarify something that I may have said last time. I'm not sure I did. I want it to be clear. That is, we are not following Freytag's lead in deciding how to structure and understand the Bible story. It's possible to walk out and say, well, Freytag's the boss here, and so we are fitting into Freytag's structure. That is not the case. What we have here is a man who has discerned, who has mined that which God himself created and instituted as storying. In other words, the elements that we discern here in this pyramid reflect the way that God wired us. This is God's story. He wired us in a way this is very interesting to us. I think probably almost any of your favorite movies or novels will follow this. And that's not just true here in the good old US of A, that's true around the world. This type of story structure grabs at the human heart because it's the way we are wired. And so Freytag did not invent something. He discovered, discerned, mined something that has been around since the very beginning. Okay. So I just the titles, may be arbitrary, and you may vary the way that you describe the process. But essentially, this is God's way of telling his story, and it's reflected in myriads of stories that man has created ever since the beginning. Okay? So let's just review real quickly. Looking at the story of the Bible, what would be the exposition, that first part?
Creation.
Right, Genesis 1 and 2, the creation, right? What's the inciting incident? Fall of man. Now, it's interesting that you would describe it that way, and you are correct. It is the fall of man. Is there another way that you could describe the inciting incident?
Man breaks his relationship with God.
Okay, man breaks his relationship with God. Somebody else? I heard something over here. Sin.
The offspring of the woman. That's it.
What about
the
it?
creation mandate? That part of it? That might not be. Never mind.
That's part of the. You're right. I'm just I'm looking for a summary statement of this. Satan's temptation. Now, our default explanation of this inciting incident is the fall of man. Nothing wrong with that. But in some cultures of the world, and we'll talk about this later on in the semester, a look at Genesis chapter 3 will draw attention immediately to the serpent, what he did. In fact, they would refer to him as a rival spirit that entered uninvited into the Garden of Eden, intruding God's creation, the dominion that God had given to man, and challenging that. And as a rival spirit, he attempts and succeeds at convincing the man, the woman, that he has a better idea than God. And that idea will make man equal with God. And what it actually does in the end is it replaces man's authority over the creation with the serpent himself. And that's why he's called the God of this age, the prince of this world, prince of the power of the air. Because at the moment, it's now his world. So I want you to just start thinking about that. The way that we describe things may not necessarily be the only way or even the best way, depending on where we are in the world. That's the inciting incident. It involves the serpent, it involves the man, it involves God. And relationship is an important word we'll come back to in just a little bit here. So what is the rising action then? Okay, everything up to Jesus, okay? It's all the preparation, all the pieces God is putting into place between the garden and the coming of the Lord Jesus. In fact, if you're ever preaching about this, it would be interesting to make reference to the Garden of Eden and what happened there, and the Garden of Gethsemane and what happened there as Jesus prepared to go and give his life for us and resolve this problem. Yeah. Right. So give me some of the major elements in this rising action that we read about. What are some major components in the Old Testament that happen as the story develops? Okay. Probably better to say it the other way around. God makes a covenant with Abraham, but I get you. Right. Two of them entered in together. He was sleeping at the side when God ratified the covenant. But yeah, you're right. What else? What's another major component? Yes. Exodus. Okay. God creating the nation. What makes the Exodus important? It is the formal creation of the nation through whom the Messiah will come. What else? Okay. Noahic covenant. God made a covenant with Noah. The Davidic covenant. Lots of covenants out there. Okay, we're using the word covenant a lot. Let's make sure we understand what we're saying. What is a covenant? It's promise. Is it the same as a contract? Well, go ahead.
I was going for like some similar contract.
Okay, and there are similarities, but a lot of people would distinguish between a contract and a covenant. And there is a difference. Yeah.
Isn't the covenant where no matter what on God's part, he will fulfill what he says he will do, no matter what man does?
Okay, there are conditional and unconditional covenants out there, and the unconditional covenants that we refer to are the Abrahamic covenant, the Davidic covenant, the New Covenant. These are unconditional. And the reason is because when they were ratified on one condition. That is the condition of God himself who ratifies them. Abrahamic covenant, Abraham was sleeping at the side, he doesn't pass through. The Davidic covenant, and we talked about this earlier in the semester too, I'm just reviewing. The Davidic covenant, God says, if you disobey, I will chasten you, but I will not remove from you my mercy as I did from the house of Saul. Yes, unconditional promise. The new covenant is conditioned on the blood of Jesus Christ. This cup, Jesus said, is the new covenant in my blood. Right? Okay, a contract is normally seen as something that's equally binding on both sides. As long as I keep my end of the deal, we're good. If I don't, we're out. A covenant really involves more the idea of submitting to someone who has made provisions for you and guaranteed the fulfillment of those provisions. That's more the flavor of a covenant in the Bible. And it really reflects more of a high power distance culture. We'll talk about that. Well, we did talk about that a little bit ago, a high power distance culture where the majority seeks refuge in and provision from a leader. Okay, let's look what other major components are there in this rising action in the Old Testament. The Exodus, covenants. Pardon? Okay, the Deuteronomic law, which is kind of a repetition. Deuteronomy means second law, so it's a repetition of kind of a summary of the law of Moses. Okay, that's tied in with the Exodus. The Mosaic covenant is part of that whole idea. What else? Yes. Okay, Israel's exile and restoration. And of course, the restoration is essential because the fulfillment of the proto-evangelium back in Genesis 3:15 depends on that. God has determined that the seed of the woman will come through that nation. Therefore, the preservation of the nation is essential. Okay, so to what point you get into all these things when you're talking to somebody about the gospel is going to depend on where you are and who you're talking to. We're going to come back to that later on. And of course, the climax of everything is
Jesus.
Yes, the incarnation, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And then there's everything that's, again, why the stranger on the road to Emmaus depiction here is right under the climax because it happened the day that Jesus died or rose from the dead. What's the following action?
After Jesus.
Okay, a little more specific, you're right. Okay, the spreading of the gospel via the church. What we are doing today, what we've been doing for the last 2,000 years, is part of that falling action. Again, falling doesn't mean there's inferior or something bad is happening. Falling means that this is consequential. climax has taken place. As a result, this is what happens. Okay? And then the resolution is what? Okay, it does involve prophecy, yes.
Second earth, second heaven.
Okay, even before the second earth and second heaven.
Coming, the rapture.
Second coming. Oh, okay, yeah.
Sorry, before that.
Okay, let's get our eschatology right here. What does the rapture conclude? Somebody said it.
Church age.
Church age. Okay, the rapture is a concluding event, not an initiating event. That's where we often get it mixed up with the second coming. The second coming represents the beginning of a millennial reign. The rapture is a concluding event. It wraps up the church age and takes us home. And then right after the rapture, immediately Jesus comes back to rule for 1,000 years, right? What happens? You have 7 years of tribulation, which is now here's where we get back. Remember those little dots where you're connecting, things that happen here and there? What can you connect the rapture? What can you connect the tribulation in the New Testament to in the Old Testament? Is it just an isolated period of 7 years?
I would guess the plagues.
Plagues? Well, it definitely reminds us of the plagues in Egypt. But it's tied to something specific.
The flood?
Okay, it is a time of judgment, as the flood was. You're right on that. Yeah.
What about the 70 weeks of Daniel?
Ooh, what about them? 70 weeks of Daniel. How many weeks of Daniel's prophecy have been fulfilled of those 70? 69. Daniel chapter 9. Okay. Anybody here? I'll see. You're probably not taking Daniel yet, right? Anybody here in Daniel class? Okay. Dr. Cole teaches Daniel's great class. I love the book of Daniel. 69 weeks have been fulfilled. One is left. So, this idea of tying together things in the old with the new is very important here. The tribulation period is the final concluding week of Daniel's prophecy of 70 weeks. Okay? And then, of course, in Daniel's vision, what happens? At the end of the 70th week, the final week, the Son of Man, one like the Son of Man, he says, comes, and he destroys the image, destroys the human kingdoms, the Gentile kingdoms. The age of the Gentiles includes, and the ushering in of Christ's kingdom, which is the restoration here. Now, it's not total 100% restoration. Yes, the curse is lifted from the earth. Okay. Yes, Jesus rules and reigns for 1,000 years, but there still will be sin during the millennium. Okay. There will be death during the millennium. Just read Isaiah 65 and other passages. What helps me is to view the millennium kind of like viewing a doorway. Okay, although these doorways are very narrow. Maybe think of an entryway into a large place. You come through the door, and that entry is just the beginning. And once you get through that entryway, there's a whole lot more before you. And I view the millennium that way. It's a 1,000-year reign promised to Israel. It's going to be fulfilled literally, but it is the doorway into eternity. And in that passage, that doorway, there are some remnants of sin that still exist. They will be finally wiped out in that period that we refer to here as the untying, which is when everything pertaining to the resolution is finally placed in order. Everything is resolved. So the new heavens and the new earth that one of you mentioned earlier is part of that, those concluding statements in Revelation chapters 21 and 20. All right? So what we just talked about the last 5 minutes or so here is the gospel. And I really want to drive that home in this class. When you think of the word gospel, don't think just of the climax. Obviously, without the climax, nothing else works. The gospel is the story. The good news begins in Genesis 3. I will resolve this through the seed of the woman. That's the beginning of the good news. And that good news continues right to the very end of the Bible. So what is the gospel of Jesus Christ? It's the good news that God is going to restore all things. Remember, I really like the word restoration as it pertains to God's plan and everything he's doing here. That's where it's headed. Okay, questions or comments about that? This was review, but we were rudely interrupted by a midterm exam. So I wanted to that again. Okay. Well, you mentioned relationships. Relationships are very, very important. God was in perfect harmony with Adam and Eve before the fall. And when the rival spirit entered, depicted by this, the four relationships symbolized by the heart on the lower right were broken. So I would like to ask you this morning, what are the four relationships that existed in the Garden of Eden, they continue to exist today? What are the four relationships? What's one of them?
God and man.
Okay, our relationship with God himself. What's another relationship? Yes. Okay, relationship with each other. I don't remember what. Okay. Yeah. The relationship with creation. Okay. Yeah, my order here was creation, and then with others, the order doesn't matter because that's the way I did it up here. Then there's one more. Yeah. The curse. Well, the curse is what happens as a result.
Eros.
Oh, I'm.
Eros. E-R-O-S.
Oh, eros. Oh,
Like affectionate, like romantic love.
okay, but yes, that would have been part of the others. Adam and Eve and their relationship to each other would have involved that. But there's one more kind of relationship. Yeah, your relationship to yourself. So think about that. Adam had no idea what he was doing when he sinned, Adam and Eve. Four relationships were immediately busted. Right? The relationship with God, remember they hid from God. Relationship with the creation was cursed. We just studied in Romans chapter 8 yesterday in Romans class. The whole creation is groaning today and travailing like a woman in labor until the restoration of the sons of God's people. Okay? And then Adam and Eve, their relationship with each other was broken. What evidence do we have in the Garden of Eden that their relationship with each other was damaged? How do you know that? Yeah.
They were blaming each other.
Yeah. Started blaming, right? Adam says, the woman you gave me, and the woman says it was the serpent. The serpent says, well, who else is there? I can't blame God. Right? So, blame shifting becomes the number one evidence that there's a problem with their relationship. And what evidence do we have that there's a problem in their relationship with self? Yeah, they were ashamed. Exactly. Shame comes along. And later on in the semester, we're also going to talk about honor shame, because it's a big, big deal in most of the world. And I don't think we make enough of the issue of honor and shame when we talk about the gospel, talk about the scriptures in general. Okay. All right. So all four of those relationships went kaput when Adam and Eve rebelled against God. And here's what I'd like to say to you. Most of the world is not going to be impressed by your ability to outline and articulate your theological points. Your ability to outline the gospel with verses and all that. It may work well for a test, and you should know the points of the gospel message. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. You should be able to articulate verses of scripture. Okay, all that is important. What I'm saying is that is not going to reach the heart of most people who live in our world today. But when you start a conversation with somebody saying, we struggle a lot with relationships, don't we? Man is hurting. He's hurting because he can't be at peace with himself, can't get along with his neighbors, he can't get along with his family. And when he thinks about deity or gods, he's struggling to know how to satisfy them. I mean, everything is a mess. And if you start with the relationship that God had with Adam and Eve, the Bible says that God created man, gave him a wife, and they were in perfect harmony with God. The word harmony resonates with most of the world out there today. I'm not talking about the Western world, I'm talking about the 2/3 majority world. Harmony, social harmony is extremely important. You begin talking about the Bible story by referring to relationship. God walked with Adam. There was no shame, nothing impeding their relationship. So what happened? Why? We struggle so much in the world today. Well, here's what the Bible says. And if you talk about the inciting incident of the serpent coming into the garden, you begin. And as time and resources permit, you begin to develop a story. Chapel speaker said the other day, don't neglect the Old Testament. He was absolutely right. Because without the Old Testament, the climax of the story is left a bit hollow. You have to have the Old Testament scriptures as well. Okay? A relationship is so important. And that's not just true for the two-thirds majority of the world. You guys like that too. If I came at you with my neatly planned outline with all the bullet points and verses, you may be impressed with what I know. But will you be impressed with what I understand about relationships, feelings, and all those things that are part of that? So that is very, very important. So what God did is he came through the gospel story to heal those relationships so that all four of them can exist harmoniously once again. Curse will be lifted from the earth when Jesus comes back, right? Jesus will rule as a benevolent dictator, and the nations will flood to him rather than fleeing from him. Remember, they're flooding in, drawn to him, and wars are done. There will be a final rebellion at the end of the millennium, as you know. But again, that's part of that idea that remnants are left in this doorway experience of the millennium before the eternal state is ushered in. Any questions about this issue of relationship? This is so very, very important. People resonate when you talk about relationships, because everybody in this room, I'm guessing every single person in this room is struggling with some relationship with somebody somewhere on this planet. You may be struggling with yourself, with God, with a roommate, or somebody else, maybe with a parent. Maybe you're struggling with the creation when it gets cold. That's right. That's why I struggle with the creation. He's going to go back to Brazil. Dr. Ken Rath was so funny. He starts putting on a scarf on at the end of August, man, because he was in Jamaica for so many years. Those of us who live and serve in Latin America. I'm from Ohio, but I'm still a warm weather guy. Okay, or when they cut the grass and I put weed killer on and it's still coming up anyway. The bag here says it's going to take care of my dandelions. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can't even count all the dandelions in my lawn. What's going on here? Struggle with the creation. Okay. All right. Okay, let's move on and talk about something related. Funneling. Anybody here change your oil? Wow, I'm impressed. I'm lazy. I take mine, have it changed. Well, I do a lot of things. A lot of things. But so, do you ever try to change oil without a funnel? It doesn't work too well, does it? You're going to use a lot of cans of oil. So, what is the purpose of a funnel? And ladies, you use these in cooking too, right? What's the purpose of a funnel? Maybe you don't. I don't know much about cooking. Yeah. To get what you want to go where it needs to go. That's a really good description. Yeah.
It makes the stream of liquid or whatever you're using more concentrated going into the other things.
Okay, it makes the stream more concentrated. Send it right where you want it. Yeah.
Because in cooking, you want to be precise. Because if you're not precise and if you're measuring it wrong, the item may or may not turn out.
Yeah. You mentioned cooking. I'm thinking of a variation of this. I don't know who are the coffee connoisseurs here, or what connoisseur you are, but coffee connoisseurs often have these. What do you call these things? These little things that have the funny looking spouts on them. There's a name for those in the coffee world. Huh? No, it's these. Pour the coffee in, and then they have this special spout that's just the right length and just the right width. You know what I mean? I got a couple of friends. Dr. Randy Gilmore that I put on the screen here 2 days ago. He's into that. When he goes to Asia, when we went on this trip to Japan, he had packed all this in his suitcase, and maybe some coffee that day. But it's got to be just right because blah blah blah. You were going to say something about the funnels.
Oh yeah, I was going to say like it takes a lot narrows it down. Like you're still getting the same amount of information.
Okay, you get the same amount, but it just takes longer. That's an interesting observation. Whether you just dump it out, right, the very top, or whether you send it through the funnel, it's still the same amount, but it takes longer. But why is it worthwhile for it to take longer?
If you just pour it out, it's just gonna go everywhere.
Okay.
But by pouring it in the funnel, you know where it's going.
Okay, you're aiming at a smaller target. This is very important in our discussion. Keep these things in mind. You're aiming at a smaller target, and therefore it is worthwhile for you to take longer to get it out because you know where it's going. It's specifically aimed at someone or some special situation. Yes? Oh, you just hold your pen. All right. Anybody else want to comment on that? Only this is an interesting concept. All right, well, let's carry this a little farther. Let's compare a funnel with a megaphone. Okay? Every time I put this picture up here, I'm reminded of Angels in the Outfield. That guy, the announcer, or whoever that guy is that comes up with a megaphone is squeaking. I don't know if you guys have watched it. Okay, forget it. Okay, how many of you have watched it? All right, you remember what. So, what's the difference between a funnel and a megaphone? Yes.
Something goes in the funnel and something goes out of the megaphone.
Ooh, okay. Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, we could say that something goes into both of them, namely. Oh, okay, go ahead.
So in the funnel, it's like concentrated down, whereas with the megaphone, it's magnified out.
Okay, all right. Magnified out, all right. Yeah,
I would say things that go in the funnel, big things go in and come out small.
okay.
Little things go into the megaphone and come out big.
Ooh, okay, that's interesting. Big things go in a funnel, come out small. Small things go in a megaphone and come out big. All right, interesting. All right, who else? Difference between a megaphone and a funnel. Yeah?
When you put something in a funnel, it only goes exactly where you want it, as opposed to a megaphone, have blast it everywhere.
Okay, so you can really control what comes out of a funnel, but what comes out of a megaphone is harder to lasso. Yes?
You pour liquid into a funnel, you should not pour liquid into a megaphone.
So what happens if you pour liquid into a megaphone? Make sure you're not touching it, right? It's like taking one of those 9-volt batteries and sticking it on your tongue just to see what it does. You ever do that? Don't do it. Put these two little red marks for the next week on your tongue. Yes. The name is different. All right. Get you afterwards. Okay. Yeah. Oh, you're raising or just stretching there?
Stretching.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. All right. So let's talk about these two because it has everything to do with the way we present the gospel. And I'm going to tell you right off the top that this is not original with me. Okay. I have been a disciple of sorts of Pastor Randy Gilmore. And I keep mentioning his name because he's done a lot of research and he did his doctoral work in this area of storying. Okay, and so I have learned an awful lot, and I'm not just swallowing the line and sinker what he says, but I have found his research and his conclusions to be very consistent with what I understand the Bible to teach. A megaphone is intended to cover a wide. Anybody that's within hearing distance is expected to hear this. Right? Otherwise, you better not blast it. A funnel is very focused and is usually for one person or a very small group of people. And you can imagine how that's going to affect the way that you say something and what you say. Because if you know that everybody in hearing distance is going to hear this, you're probably going to be very careful about what you say and what you don't say. Just like people that tweet, that's a form of a megaphone, right? Twitter is a megaphone. As soon as something goes on, you can pull it off in 5 minutes, but too late, it's out there. And everybody who has Twitter can hear it. Even those that don't end up hearing it one way or the other. Okay? So, but a funnel is very, very specifically targeted. Usually, megaphones are used for very brief single messages. Why? If you're standing on a busy street and using a megaphone, people are walking by. The average person is not going to stop and give you 15 or 20 minutes of time. They're busy, they have agendas, they're not interested in stopping. But whatever you say, you better make sure that it's very precise, very compact, because you've only got a few seconds of their time there, and they're gone. Okay? Whereas with funneling, you can actually create multiple messages because you are concentrating on an individual or a small group of people, and therefore you have time to develop the message or messages that you're trying to communicate with them. Okay. There's going to be limited feedback with the megaphone approach. How many people are going to respond to you if you're trying to give a quick presentation of the gospel using a megaphone? Please understand, I am not saying that the megaphone approach is wrong, because there are times when all we can do is share the gospel very quickly with someone in a situation that doesn't give us more opportunity. So I'm not blasting this, unintended. I am simply saying that these are limitations of using the megaphone, and there are also limitations for the funneling approach as well. Okay, but there is specific feedback given when you're funneling, because the spout, the narrow spout, signifies that you are sharing something very specific, a narrow truth in the scriptures, and you are anticipating specific feedback to that statement, that declaration, that teaching, whatever it is that you're sharing. Okay? And you can't do that in a large group because most people aren't even going to give you the time of day. Not going to be interested in that. When you're using a megaphone, you're focused on message efficiency. Okay. What does the word efficient mean? What does it mean to be efficient?
Get it done faster.
Get it done faster. What else? Is efficiency just about speed?
Get it done right.
Okay. Get it right. Cut the fat. All right. If we didn't do this year, but last year, I had some student volunteers come to the front, and I gave them 30 seconds to share the gospel. So what do you do in 30 seconds? You have to cut all the fat. You try to narrow it down as much as possible to get it out. All right? And that's what happens with the megaphone approach, because normally you're dealing with people that don't. It may be a literal street corner thing where people are walking by, or you hand somebody a tract and you know that those people are not already attuned to that, to wanting to read your gospel tract. And if you give somebody a gospel tract with 3 or 4 pages in it, chances of them reading that are probably slim, right? You give them something that's very basic, right to the point, efficient. Chances of them reading it are much better. That's the idea here. With funneling, you actually have message expansion. You're doing a very small bit. You're working with someone or a small group, okay? But as you share that, okay, you have opportunity to expand and explain further the message that's being communicated. Yeah, Jared.
With the idea of putting something succinct and focused on a tract, how small can you make the gospel presentation with it still being appropriate?
You know, that's a very good question. How small, how much can you reduce the gospel message and still call it the gospel message? When I told you that the gospel begins in the Garden of Eden and ends in Revelation, I'm not saying that anything other than a full-blown explanation is not the gospel, okay? Because it's all part of the gospel. It's all the good news. Let me throw that out for you folks to answer. How do you know how far you can reduce what you share of the gospel and for it to still be the gospel, still be useful? Yeah? Okay, stop talking about God, there's a problem, right? All right?
As long as you make sure that you're not, in that short amount of time that you're talking about it, that you're not like contradicting yourself. Because a lot of times when we talk fast, we have a message intended that we're trying to get across,
Mhm.
but because we're talking fast, our mind is working faster than what it was when we were thinking about it.
Mhm.
So it could come off wrong, and as long as we keep to the main point.
Okay, so we'll make sure we don't contradict ourselves, all right?
Make sure that it's clear that they're in need of salvation.
Make sure that their need of salvation is clarified.
You miss out both parts of the good news and the bad news.
You leave out parts of the good news and the bad news, okay? Let me summarize this. And you guys are all right. All of these contributions are part of the discussion. Jared, I would say this. You have to know your audience. If you assume that your hearer has a prior knowledge of the truth, and so you skip over certain things in order to get right to the point of the cross, for example, you may be doing a disservice to that person. Because if you're talking to a Hindu, for example, about Jesus, presenting him as God, and well, okay, the Hindu in his mind is thinking, okay, I have 16 gods of my own. Here's another one. What does he have to contribute? So I'm assuming something that's not true in the mind of that person. Very, very important you understand who the audience is, right? So how much you can reduce the gospel is going to depend on that. Now, if you're standing on a street corner, we did this in Tokyo. We stood on one of the busiest street corners in the world. I mean, when the walk light came on, literally thousands of people walked across the street all at once. In fact, I think it's reputed as the busiest street corner in the world. And we're standing there with tracts. And Pastor Randy Gilmore did this for a reason. He wanted to, most Chinese will never even take a tract. And somebody told us, did I say Chinese? Japanese. Most Japanese will not even accept a tract in Tokyo. Somebody told us that if a Japanese person does accept your tract, you can be pretty sure he or she will read it. Most of them won't even make eye contact. You know, you offer a tract to them and just like this walking by. And we do that too sometimes. But if somebody does take a tract, I'm going to read it. So what do you put on that tract? Is it even worthwhile giving them a tract? Not knowing their background. Well, God uses all sorts of things. We can't put God in a box. Okay, you hear stories about somebody ripped up a tract and threw it out. Somebody comes along, is ready to commit suicide, finds the broken up tract, puts it together, reads it, and comes to Christ. But when that happens, you know that there's been something going on in the past, some preparatory work of the Holy Spirit. There's some prior knowledge, because most gospel tracts are not able to tell the whole story. Or if they do it may include assumptions that the average reader does not make. So it just depends. Yeah, I'm not against tracts. I'm very much in favor of using tracts. Sometimes a gospel tract will stimulate interest for knowing more, create questions in the mind of the person that desires more information. Jared?
Do you think that in the United States, we can assume that most people know enough to be able to go off from a certain starting point?
I think that's becoming less and less true. The question, I'm repeating these for the sake of the online students. Can we assume in the U.S. that the average person has enough context of the Bible, gospel message, in order to be able to understand in a very succinct presentation of the gospel? That's becoming less and less the case. There was a point in which, verbiage, even in an unsaved household, would sound very Christian. That's less and less true today. And there are lots of reasons for that. But, and again, so if you are using a tract type of ministry, okay, it's important to be very, very careful. Try to include as much as you can. But again, it can too much. The average person not even going to give it the time of day. So it's tricky. It really is. But God does use tracts. He uses them to. Anybody here come to Christ as a result, or at least did receiving a gospel tract contribute to your coming to Christ? Anybody here? In your case, it did, Jade? Right. A friend of yours give you a tract, or just somebody passing by, or how'd that work?
My local church is like 300, and as a kid, I was like church, whatever. But like these two, I think it was, these two deacons came to my house, and they were doing like door-to-door evangelism. They presented me a tract. I read the tract, and I started having questions about God, and then I came to the church.
Okay. Jade said something very interesting here, which really emphasizes my point. When you read that tract, it created questions because there were blanks there. There were things you didn't understand. And so You live would you say 3 houses down or 3 blocks from the church?
Never.
Yeah, and so here God used the tract ministry to call your attention to something that was right in your backyard, basically. And that curiosity that welled up in your soul drove you to find out more about it. And God does use tracts oftentimes for that sort of thing. Okay, so I don't want anybody walking out here saying Mr. Lounsboro's, bashing tracts, he's bashing any succinct form of sharing the gospel, because that's not the case. God uses all sorts of ways and means. But as much as possible, we need to understand who our recipients are. And I will say this. Many, if not most, of our programs for evangelism do not facilitate an intimacy with people we're trying to reach. Most local church evangelism programs are more on the cold turkey side, just getting people than they are on the relationship building side. If your church has an evangelistic emphasis that really works on developing relationships with people, then I want to encourage you to continue in that vein. And again, there is a place for cold turkey. I just went out last night with students from Lieutenant Community Baptist, and we hit newcomers. There are newcomers flooding into the city of A. We cannot keep up with them all. It's the 4th fastest growing city in the United States, percentage-wise. And so we're saying, hey, we've got a newcomer bag for you. First thing I say when we ring the doorbell, because people are already suspicious, I'll try to knock that down by saying, hey, got a newcomer bag for you. Oh. And just some information about our church. And we're right over here on 47th and Aiken Boulevard. And do you have a church home? Do you guys have a place to go? And I'm answer. And, and so that's cold turkey. There is a place for that. I think we should do that. But if that's all we're doing, I think we're really shortchanging our responsibility to develop relationships with people with a view to sharing the gospel. Yeah.
The good way my pastor put it my pastor actually taught my Bible class back in my high school. So when he was talking about like the gospel, and not just the gospel, just like correcting people when they are doing something wrong, you can't correct someone before connecting with them. And he used the phrase "connect before you correct."
I like that.
And like that's just like really stuck with me because it's changed how I view and how I present everything. I first try to connect with somebody before I try to correct them.
Right.
So
That's really good.
Is that what you're?
Yeah, absolutely. Connect before you correct. The idea there is that most people are not going to open up about their sins, about their need, if they don't know you from Adam. Okay, connect with them. And then as you develop a relationship with people, you're more likely to open up and to share and be receptive to your presentation of the problem of sin in the heart. Very good. All right. One more here. Well, I'll give it 2 more. John 3:16 would be a typical example of how to blast the gospel. And you all know the John 3:16 guy, and he's been kind of overshadowed now by the guy asking for beer money, but that's the way. I don't know when this John 3:16 guy first started. This has been a long time ago. Was it in Green Bay? He started off. Was he a Packers fan? So I thought, yeah. And what was he doing? He was using the megaphone way of sharing the gospel. It's very succinct. If you were to ask most any Christian, give me the gospel in 1 verse, I'm going to say John 3:16. Now, when you read John 3:16, you'll see that there's a whole lot not in that verse that needs to be understood by someone coming to Christ, right? For instance, what essential of the gospel is not mentioned in John 3:16? Yeah, the sin's never mentioned in John 3:16. Now, is it mentioned in the passage? Yeah. Jesus talks about unbelief. I'm not knocking John 3:16. I'm just saying that in that particular verse, there's nothing about sin. Whoever believes in him. Okay, what else? Yes.
It doesn't directly state that he was raised from the dead.
Okay, it doesn't mention anything about the death and resurrection of Christ.
Yeah.
It just says God sent his son, okay? He gave his only begotten son. And there's a whole lot to that. What does he mean he gave his son to us? And, he was born in a manger. Yeah, what else does it mean? Well, it's the whole incarnation story. Right. So John 3:16 will work in one of two ways. Number one, it can incite curiosity, like it did for you, Jade, cause somebody to seek for more. Okay? Or if somebody already has some background, it can be used by the Spirit of God to tip the scales, to really draw them to Christ. So there's nothing wrong with it, but we have to understand these things. Yes. Well, yeah, in the very next verse it does. God did not send his son to the world to condemn the world, but through him that the world might be saved. Right, but the verse itself, the immediate verse doesn't. Yeah, and again, it has a use, but we need to understand this side of it. With funneling, you have Genesis to Revelation. Now, obviously, nobody's going to sit in the stands in Green Bay, with a whole Bible open from Genesis to Revelation. Can't do that. All right. Obviously, this kind of gospel presentation is going to require time. In fact, one of the things that you should be noticing in this comparison is on the right side, you need time. On the left side, very little time. It's something that can be done right now, quickly. And here's what I'd like to say to all of us, and I include myself in this because I struggle with this as well. That is, it's much easier for us to go the megaphone route than it is to go the funneling route. Because the funneling route is what's going to take an investment of time and effort in someone's life. And most of us struggle with that part. And so, we are, most of my evangelistic involvement when I got saved and was in the church there, really was more the megaphone side, about cold turkey stuff. Good, but it can't stop there. So I'm going to repeat this again, running the risk of being redundant. I am not criticizing cold turkey evangelism. I did it last night. I think it's a great ministry. I think churches ought to use it, but it cannot be the only way. Okay, we've got to work at developing relationships. Why? Because what's the problem with mankind? Relationships. 4 relationships were broken that God wants to heal. And when you establish relationships with people and begin to share this message little by little, depending on where they are and what they know, you funnel those truths into that study. Now you're beginning to lead them to a solution. This is hard. This takes time. There are pastors who spend a lot of time in the study and not as much time, and both have to be done. Jared?
When you know that the blasted type of message is the only way, the only time you have, or the only thing that you have time for, what is the best way to spark those types of questions that Jade referenced with the track? What is the best thing to bring up to spark the most amount of questions in a short amount of time?
Okay, so if you're limited in a situation to the blasting method, the megaphone, what are the essential elements, the most important things to bring up? People have tried to answer that question in a number of ways. I'm going to ask you, give me an example of a track. There's some very popular tracks that have attempted to address this issue. Give me an example of one that maybe you've used, I've used, to summarize the gospel in certain ways. Can you think of? Yeah.
God, man, Christ response.
Okay. God, man, Christ response. Is that a evangelism course that you did?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay. Evangelism Explosion out of Florida did it similarly. Grace, man, God, Christ, faith. They said it's easy to do it. You can use your fingers. Grace, salvation by grace, not by works. Man, sin is a problem with God. God, he'll send his son, Christ, came to die for us. By faith, we embrace it. You have another one there?
Bridge track.
The bridge track. Okay, and I love the bridge track. Most people are visual learners. In fact, I would say this, if you are going to use the megaphone method, I would strongly encourage you to use visuals because they capture people's attention. Even if they just glance at it, it's there. Visuals stay with you. So if you give them something that's got a lot of little writing on it, it's not likely it's going to burn itself into their mind. Yeah.
3 things God cannot do.
3 things God cannot do. What are they?
God cannot change.
Okay.
I think the second. I know God can't let anyone into heaven,
Uh-huh.
and that's the born again. And
guy can't sin. That's like going, he can't change, he can't sin, and he can't let anybody into heaven who hasn't received Christ as Savior. Yeah. So that's approaching it, looking at God himself. Okay. What's another way that they tried to capitalize it? Yeah. Oh, okay. Using the acrostic of the word gospel itself. Say that again. God, our sins, paying everyone life. Okay, I haven't heard that before. That's a new one. Anybody hear the four spiritual laws before? Campus Crusade popularized that one, the four spiritual laws. And they include man's problem, God's provision, those things. Try to summarize the essence of the gospel in that. I mean, Jared, you have to have something about the problem of man. You have to have something about the provision. You have to have something about the nature of God. Why is man a sinner? Because he doesn't. Who makes the rules? God does. You have to have something about faith and receiving the message by faith. So the ways that people have gone about putting that together are just as varied as there are people in this room. Okay, but the four spiritual laws, 4 things God wants you to know. Maybe you read a tract like that title sometime. It includes these elements that you guys have mentioned. Yeah. So try to get those in when we have to, and that's the only way we can do it. By the way, you should be writing these things down on a piece of paper somewhere, because this could sneak up to bite you, like maybe in the next class. So make sure you get, or you take a picture. I got one more to put on here. Whoops, no, I don't. Sorry, I thought that was, hold on. Change. All right. Yeah, so know those. I'm not going to make you reproduce them from memory, but I may ask a question that, like, which one of these pertains to blasting, which one of these pertains to funneling, that's sort of a question. Or what are the 2 contrasting approaches that we use? Megaphone, funneling, that, you should know that. Okay, any other questions or comments regarding this? Yes?
Maybe more of the funneling would be like the John studies from Dr. Hal Miller. The John studies from Dr. Hal Miller.
Okay, Dr. Hal Miller doing John studies. I don't know if you folks know Dr. Hal Miller. For years, he did work on campuses. And I have friends that were saved in his ministry on college campuses. And then he spent the last several years of his life in jail. He said that jokingly. God's given him a jail ministry, and he's in jail all the time sharing the gospel with people. But he has a son that lives in Colorado, I think.
They're still at the college out there.
And he's got a series of John studies. This takes time. So he gathers with jailbirds or people on campuses, and he takes time to share the gospel in that manner. Good. Any other questions or comments related to this? Megaphone. What's that? Hal Miller, H-A-L, Hal Miller. He's his mid-80s, still plays tennis, I hear.
Yeah.
Still wins.
Ping pong.
Yeah. Ping pong. Yeah, the guy he was uniquely gifted by God in a number of ways. Neat guy. Yep. Okay, let's switch gears to something that's related to this, and you'll see some of the things that we've been talking about this morning. I'm giving it to you in a little different fashion here. Content selection. Jared, this harkens back to your question. How do we know what to choose? Basically, we're comparing or contrasting message efficiency, just getting it right down to what really matters, because you don't have much time, you have a limited audience, or limited time, limited interest, and message expansion. What kind of content do you choose with message expansion? In message efficiency, information drops out. By the way, if you want a good example of message efficiency, just watch any commercial on television. How long are most commercials? Yeah, 30 seconds or so, right? Except for these ones that are selling, they call them hearing aids and things like that, so they go on and on forever sometimes. Most commercials take about 30 seconds. By the way, why do those ones that are selling hearing aids and things normally go on for so long because they're targeting an audience that is used to giving more time to somebody that's talking to them, an older audience. The average commercial is about 30 seconds. How much do these companies pay during the Super Bowl for that 30-second slot? Millions of dollars, 30 seconds. You talk about that, watch commercials and you'll get a good education on message efficiency because they have to pack into that commercial everything that you need to know, not necessarily to be able to buy the car, but at least to get you hooked. And I want to be careful about using that term. We don't want to use things like gospel tracts to get people hooked. I just don't like that kind of terminology, all right? The Spirit of God is the one that really grabs the heart. Don't use words like, okay, the Spirit of God does that. But that is the principle that's going on in message efficiency. You've got to share that which is absolutely essential and that grab at the heart of an individual. Jared, I would say this too, and answer your question. I don't think that in a gospel tract you necessarily even have to put all of the gospel elements. You may just focus on, for instance, relationship. Are you broken? Pose a question, perhaps, and then give them a website or a phone number or something. Say, if you're interested in hearing more about this. Sometimes we use gospel tracts in that way. You focus on one particular aspect. Somebody just gone through a hurricane. They develop a tract that talks about disaster. Why? Your name your tract might be why hurricane, why this, and you're just going to touch on this question. Is there a God? How can there be a God who loves us if this kind of thing happens? And just focus on that, and then give a website or a phone number for further information. That's another way of viewing the megaphone means of sharing the gospel. So in message efficiency, information drops out. You can't include it all. If I tell you that I want you to write a one-page paper, okay, on the book of Ephesians, you got to leave a whole lot of stuff out. You can't even write the first chapter of Ephesians. Well, you can, barely on one page. So you're sitting there thinking, okay, what is really essential? What do I need to include? Or you might say, I'm just going to focus on one theme in Ephesians that I see running through the book. So you go after that. So information has to drop out in order for you to keep the paper to one page. That's what happens with message efficiency. Okay? Billboards. Okay? You guys might remember this. I remember when I was in college, I think they started coming out with the billboard. Oh dear. They came out with a series of them. The first one was I'm sorry. I thought I remembered. There was a series of billboards came on. Each one had just one phrase on it. Okay, and each phrase kind of led you to the next. And they would keep one billboard up for a few months, then they would switch and put the next phrase up, and eventually it got to the question of salvation. Yeah. Oh, I found it. That was the first one. First billboard came up, so I found it. They let that up for months. And then I don't remember the ones that came after that. But that's the idea. Okay, message expansion actually adds information. And remember, you need time. So you're using smaller portions, more precise, more specific information, but you add to that as time goes on. You add to it very specifically depending on the individual you're talking to. If you sit down with an individual to share the gospel, I do not recommend that you just sit them in a chair and say, let me share with you the gospel. I recommend you ask questions and that you start where they are. When you study the book of Acts and you get to the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts chapter 8, okay, how does Philip approach this guy? Yeah. He asks, what are you reading? Because the guy is reading from Isaiah 53, and apparently there's been an argument back in Jerusalem as to whether this is referring to the nation or to the prophet or to somebody else. And the Jews didn't agree on this, so he's in his chair with his head spinning. Of course, God's been preparing him. And so Philip sees him reading something, and he begins with a question. What are you reading? Or he actually says, do you understand what you're reading? That's the specific question. And what's the guy say? How can I if somebody doesn't help me? I wish that all witnessing opportunities were that easy. Wouldn't it be nice to go up to somebody and say, and ask them a question, a spiritual question, and say, man, I've been wondering about that. I'd really like somebody to explain that to me. That doesn't happen every day, all right? But the message expansion, follows the lead really of the listener. You're going to get the whole gospel there, but the way that you present it, the elements that you share, they depend on where that person is spiritually. That person just went through a divorce, for example. You might not start with sin. You might start with, hey, why do relationships do this? Back to the garden. Or it happened. So that's the idea. Facts in isolation. You have to. You can't give the context in a gospel tract. You may be able to say something quick about what Jesus did, but there just isn't much room to expand on that. The fact of Christ dying and rising again is presented pretty much in an isolated manner, leaving out so many of the things that you want to share. Whereas message expansion allows for context and coherence. You can broaden, you have more time, you can discuss the implications of what you're saying. You're talking about sin. What is it? Don't just assume that everybody out there knows what sin is. Sin is defined in different ways by different people. If you use the typical word sin in Japan, it means crime. You're sitting there talking about, we're all sinners, and he's thinking, he's saying everybody's a criminal? I don't think so. So this is where funneling comes in. You have a chance to milk that discussion more and explain more about what you mean. And then message efficiency is a response to logic. Usually, when you're doing something quick or through a tract or whatever, you're dealing with the logic of a person. You're making them think, yeah, that makes sense. You want to share something quickly that's going to make people think, yeah, he has a point. That's the idea of a response to logic. If you share something very briefly that doesn't seem to make sense, that doesn't seem to connect the dots, more than likely the person isn't going to give it any attention. So you appeal to logic when you do that. Whereas message expansion really focuses more on the story. Now, I'm not saying that the story is not logical. I'm just saying that you really need to have a story before you can really understand your need for Christ. Not all the elements, not every detail of the Bible. You don't have to have a college education, all the survey of Old Testament, New Testament, and all your theology class in order to be saved. But when you have the opportunity to invest in someone in the funneling way, you can show them the bigger picture. The logic will be there. God's story is not illogical. So we can summarize by saying that the megaphone method is linear, logical, and abstract. Let me give you the comparison. I think maybe it'll help you to see. Whereas the message expansion, the funneling method, is holistic, experiential, and concrete. And what we mean by that, linear means, okay, A and then B and then C. You have to tell it very succinctly like that. Whereas the holistic idea is that you can expand, you can give them the fuller story. The holistic in the sense of the wholeness of the story. The fattening, putting the fat on the bones. Compare a skeleton over here. All I can do is just give you the skeleton with putting meat on the bones. That's the holistic idea. Yes? Because concrete it is a word that we use more in relationship to a story. You're talking about what happened. Abstract is more like the concept of defining terms. Sin, justification, righteousness. See, those are abstract terms that have to be defined using logic. Whereas the story, you can tell the story and never even use the word, justification, you will, but the story itself, by telling the story, you're actually communicating that to the listener. That's why children love stories. You can tell a Bible story to a child. You don't have to define sin, you probably will, but you don't have to give you a definition of sin. No, the story itself makes it clear to the child what that sin is. See, you just tell them what happened. That's what we're getting at here. Okay, abstract versus concrete. Concrete shows the story, the terms, the definition of those terms will, to a large degree, take care of themselves. Okay, now, yeah, get all that written down too. And all right, is this way of presenting this new to you guys? Have you heard this stuff before? Is this at all stimulating your thinking? Are you? I guess I want to know if this is being helpful, if this is giving you something to chew on. We're going to do an exercise next class that will involve a lot of classroom participation. I'm looking forward to it. And online students, you'll get to be a part of this too, because I will give the microphone to certain individuals in the group. You'll become a part of their group for this exercise. But looking forward to that. All right. You had some thought, and I'll let you go a couple minutes early because that's all I have for today. Thank you.